She-Ra and the Princesses of Power is a goofy show. It's a story about a bunch of teenagers with ridiculous names battling the forces of evil with the power of friendship. Its characters include singing pirates, talking horses, and gay lizards. And yet, it's not afraid to show its characters grappling with harsh realities, such as social isolation and parental loss. These characters grow and change, sometimes going down dark paths, even as their friends try to stop them. No character exemplifies this more than Catra. I've already talked at length about the tragedy of her upbringing, and in seasons 2 and 3, we see how she was manipulated into becoming a destructive monster. It's easy to put all the blame on Catra for nearly causing the world to end in the season finale. While her actions are not entirely forgivable, they can be understood by looking at how she had been abused all her life. Catra had not only suffered under the familial neglect of Shadow Weaver, but also the militaristic conditioning of Hordak. Catra's destructive actions can be directly linked to her Horde indoctrination, as it corrupted her sense of self and caused her to abandon all of her relationships. Part 1. Fear and Loathing in the Fright Zone. By promoting Catra to Force Captain, Hordak indoctrinated and manipulated Catra's identity. Once Catra had been finally given responsibility and respect as a member of the Horde, she fell victim to its ruthless military structure and dogma.
With the woods frozen and the princesses distracted by the bots, we've been able to gain significant new ground.
You have not disappointed me, Force Captain. Clearly, I was wise to promote you.
Hordak acted as another pseudo-parental figure for Catra, but he was far harsher than anything she had encountered before. Shadow Weaver had ingrained in Catra that she was a worthless nobody who would never accomplish anything. Hordak, on the other hand, promised Catra power and respect in exchange for unyielding loyalty.
I assumed Hordak finally realized what a lazy, worthless creature you are and banished you.
Just the opposite. Hordak values me. I've been busy helping the Horde get closer than it's ever been to defeating the rebellion. His words.
Since Catra had been deprived of recognition for so long, she was more than eager to show her devotion to the Horde. She played right into Hordak's hands. Catra fell into the same mentality as Adora, one in which she took every military loss as a personal failure. She only accepted validation from Hordak, and whenever she failed, Hordak was sure to make her suffer, maintaining the threat of replacement over her head.
Failure is when something ceases to serve a purpose. When that happens, it becomes worthless to me. Thus far, your performance has been lacking.
As well, the presence of Hordak's spy imp and the brutal punishment of defectors created an ever-looming sense of dread in Catra's mind, one where weakness and dissent could never be shown. While the rebellion fighters worked on trusting each other even in dire circumstances, the Horde was riddled with suspicion and paranoia. Catra used this to her advantage to displace Shadow Weaver, but she later fell victim to it when Shadow Weaver escaped. Catra's lie to Hordak about Entrapta displays how this environment of deception became self-fulfilling, as Catra used Hordak's own manipulation tactics against him. Catra's Horde mentality made her as ruthless and paranoid as her abusers.
She wouldn't.
Did you really think she was on our side? Oh, you can't trust anyone. Especially a princess. They'll just use you to get what they want.
In her paranoia and stress brought on by her new position, Catra became fearful that Shadow Weaver was attempting to sabotage her. Shadow Weaver stood as a symbol of Catra's old life, a life in Adora's shadow, with no ambition or future. Each time that Catra gloated over Shadow Weaver, she was trying to assert to herself that she had moved past her old life, but Shadow Weaver saw right through the facade, which in turn pushed Catra to be more focused on the Horde's military goals to prove Shadow Weaver wrong.
We're gaining ground and our armies are growing. When they're ready to roll out, I will be at the head and you'll be here, rotting.
Hordak's exile sentence to Shadow Weaver tested Catra's Horde loyalty. Catra's offer to help Shadow Weaver shows that she was desperately trying to redeem something from her past.
Shadow Weaver is useful and she can help us.
Seriously? Because she hasn't exactly given us any information. Why do you really want to keep her around? She's never been very nice to you. I kind of thought you hated her.
Yeah. You wouldn't understand.
What makes this moment so tragic is that this was the one time Catra could break free from her unquestioning Horde loyalty. And just as she began to open up, she was brutally betrayed. Catra internalized this as, I lost Shadow Weaver, as in, it was my fault for being manipulated. She saw this as not only a personal failure, but a Horde failure as well. Shadow Weaver had not only revoked Catra's chance at glory and success, she had proven the Horde ideology that having compassion and trust for others is foolish.
Caring about people is what got me into this mess.
As punishment for her defection, Hordak publicly humiliated Catra before sending her into exile. Hordak's methodology draws an uncanny amount of parallels to real-life hate groups, where recruiters take in the young and impressionable.
I started to watch very closely as the leaders of this organization would target vulnerable young people who felt marginalized and then draw them in with promises of paradise that were broken.
They use a dogma that focuses on showing the enemy as inhuman monsters, and poses those inside the group as the ones to stop these false threats.
You know she's a princess, right? How can you follow her? Princesses are a dangerous threat to everyone on Etheria.
Is that what Hordak told you?
Well, I thought it was just common knowledge. They're violent instigators who don't even know how to control their powers.
The ideology of those within eventually becomes their only identity, as any other deviation is considered a failure and a challenge to their very being.
Forget Hordak, forget Adora, forget all of them.
We could rule the Crimson Waste together. Just the two of us. We could, you know, be happy.
I have to go check on the prisoner.
Catra's a perfect analogy for those who come from a broken home and find comfort and community with such groups. Just as those within these organizations are often forced to choose between their friends and their superiors, so too did Catra. In her need to feel validated in Hordak's eyes, Catra sacrificed what few friends she had. Part 2. Who needs friends? Catra's indoctrination as a Horde commander eventually caused her to abandon her social connections, plunging her into despair. This trend started with Catra's treatment of the kind-hearted Scorpia. Throughout these 2 seasons, Catra continually ignored Scorpia's affection. It's heartbreaking to watch the Horde princess try and try again to reach out and connect with Catra, only to be pushed to the side. Why did Catra seek affection and validation from others who scorned her when Scorpia was right there? The main reason is that Catra did not see Scorpia as an equal, so her validation and praise meant nothing.
I've been a little busy, you know, almost toppling Bright Moon and coming closer than anyone ever has to conquering the planet for the Horde. Not that anybody seems to care.
I care.
Catra's Horde mindset taught that displays of affection were a weakness, so Scorpia's overt kindness and clumsy nature made Catra feel inadequate just by being around her. Also, because Scorpia cared little for the success of the Horde's conquest, it was easy for Catra to think of herself as superior.
I was hoping you could just tell me what I'm supposed to be looking for.
If you spent more time following orders and less time questioning them, you wouldn't need me to. Now get out!
It is worth noting as well that Scorpia is a princess, which may have subconsciously pushed Catra away from her.
I should have known better than to trust a princess.
Catra saw in Scorpia a foolish innocence, a reflection of the part of herself that had been manipulated by Shadow Weaver. In brief moments we see Catra slowly open up to Scorpia's kindness, but any interference from Catra's old life caused her to retract back.
When I bring this back to the Fright Zone, Hordak will see me for what I'm worth and I'll be back on top.
She would always remember the pain of her past connections and her fears of being abandoned. The lingering effects of Catra's Horde training prevented her from opening up to the one person who was trying to help her. While Catra had some connection with Scorpia, she was much crueler to Entrapta. Catra never saw Entrapta as a friend, only as a tool to further her standing with Hordak.
I'm not sure if we can trust her yet, but if she's telling the truth, this could give us a huge advantage over the rebellion. Hordak will finally see how much more valuable I am than Shadow Weaver.
Entrapta never questioned Catra's orders, and lacked the social awareness to see how Catra was treating her. To Catra, Entrapta would only remain as her loyal engineer, providing her with proof to Hordak that she was advancing the Horde's progress. Yet, when Entrapta's unique personality and knowledge allowed her to forge a bond with Hordak, Catra soon began to see Entrapta as a threat. Now that Entrapta was working directly with Hordak, she no longer had to follow Catra's command. Catra then began to panic, as she saw Entrapta and Hordak shared a unique trust with each other.
You're being pushed out.
I am not. It's just Entrapta understands all that tech stuff.
Even though Entrapta had defended her and softened her sentence with Hordak, Catra only saw Entrapta as a means to an end, especially when she returned from the Crimson Wastes. It only made sense then that Catra's instinct would be to get Entrapta out of the way once Adora had changed the Tech Princess's mind. As per her Horde doctrine, and the fact that Entrapta had sided with Adora, Catra sought to attain victory at any cost. With her teammates removed or too afraid to stand up to her, Catra had eliminated any attempts from others to help her, especially from the ones who were most hurt by her transformation. Part 3. This is all your fault. Catra's and Adora's relationship fundamentally fractures at the end of Season 3. The two had embraced their respective roles after the Battle of Brightmoon, but Catra knew that Adora would still try to swing her over to the side of the rebellion. In their battles, Catra put on an air of smugness, confident that while she and Adora had parted ways, Adora was still holding back.
Don't move! Oh, please. You'd never have the guts.
But Catra also saw Adora as the single biggest obstacle standing in her way of conquest. As a princess, and the unquestioned strongest among the Alliance, Adora had become the central focus of Catra's new position. The feud continued until she encountered Adora scavenging Mara's ship. When Adora told Catra about Shadow Weaver, Catra had a breakdown. In a moment of pure rage, she constructed a narrative that everything that had gone wrong with her life was because of Adora. In this new warped view, Adora had kept her from being recognized as a Horde cadet while they were children, and had relished in Shadow Weaver's spotlight. Then, Adora had abandoned Catra in the Fright Zone, and forced her to take the punishment for defection. And then after that, she had still made Catra's life even more difficult by halting her military progress wherever she went. And even still after that, Adora had caused Shadow Weaver to leave Catra, ruining her Horde career and stranding her out in the wasteland. No matter where the two went, no matter what side they were on, Catra was always in Adora's shadow, always second best. Overwhelmed by blinding rage, Catra fixated herself on making sure she would win this time. She relapsed into her Horde indoctrination, as Catra saw with her own eyes a princess that had destroyed everything she had tried to accomplish. With no direct outlet for her rage, she forced herself back into the Fright Zone to resume her old Horde position. Whatever damage the portal would cause didn't matter, as long as she could finally see that look of defeat in Adora's eyes. Catra had watched in fury as Adora had turned both Shadow Weaver and Entrapta against her. It seemed to Catra as though everything she had worked for was slipping away from her. In the fracturing reality of the portal, Catra stated it clear.
You made me this! You took everything from me!
It was a delightful comfort to channel her self-hatred and doubt onto the one person who, in her eyes, had ruined her life. Catra had pushed Adora to her limits, and severed the friendship in the process. The Horde mindset had mutated Catra's fear and hatred into capricious destruction, and Adora was the prime target. When the two emerged from the portal, Catra retreated with Hordak as she fled from Adora's conviction and the consequences of her actions. Catra embraced the Horde as a means to become stronger and prove herself to Shadow Weaver and Adora, but in doing so, she surrendered her desires to those of militarism and subjugation. The effects of the abusive Horde ideology do not absolve Catra for her actions, but they provide a keen insight into how she developed her self-destructive behavior. The events of the Portal arc show how this twisted, dogmatic mindset, combined with her vendetta, caused Catra to unleash horrific damage and sacrifice all her remaining friendships. Whatever she would do next, she would be utterly alone. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like, or subscribe if you'd like to see more of these in the future. You can also follow me on Twitter @StarfruitGrady1. As always, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.